to another episode of First Down by CoachTools. Today I'm here with Coach Dave Gibbs. Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Thanks for having me.
Coach Gibbs is the wide receivers coach for the Great Britain national team. Before we dive into things, Coach, can you just share with the audience about your background and how you've ultimately got involved in your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. While I was younger, lived out in the United States, just outside Washington DC, which is where I first got involved in football. Once I moved back, had a brief playing career, which was cut short due to injury, and sort of fell into coaching quite naturally. Just enjoyed that side of the game quite a lot. Sort of worked my way up through various position roles on offense for a handful of local teams down here in the south coast of the UK. Before eventually being fortunate enough to be invited onto the Great Britain staff, initially as a graduate assistant, working with the offensive passing game, and eventually being promoted to my current position as wide receivers coach. I'm also the offensive coordinator for a community team here on the south coast, the Portsmouth Dreadnoughts, as well as a university team, the University of Portsmouth Destroyers.
Nice. So can you tell me about that first experience you had with football when you were in DC?
Yeah, I mean, I knew nothing about the game when I arrived at all. Like, it's just not something I'd been exposed to. And my sixth grade teacher in elementary school asked me who my Super Bowl team was. And my first response was, "What's the Super Bowl?" Like, I literally had no exposure to it whatsoever. And it was, I think, 2006, and it was the Steelers and the Seahawks. And I was like, okay, which one's closer? Like, because I had no concept of where Pittsburgh or Seattle were, because I was, a kid living in Washington, DC, 3,500 miles from where I grew up. So sort of fell into it, started watching more, Steelers games after that, sort of like started to, get into the sport. And then, played a little bit in elementary school, then came back to the UK shortly after which, at the time, there wasn't really football available until I sort of turned 16, where I started playing locally, went off to a college team here in the UK, played there for 2 years, won a national championship with them. But unfortunately, due to some bad injury luck, that was all cut short. And I started coaching when I was sort of 18, 19 years old.
Wow. So how many years have you been coaching at this point now?
So I'm just going into my 11th or 12th year coaching now.
Wow.
Like I said, it was all cut very short due to injury in terms of playing. So I was able to get into actually coaching quite early on. And being quite a young coach when I first started, the first time I was calling plays in a game, I was 19. Calling plays on and installing an offense on a team, a community team here where we have players, in their late 30s, in their 40s, convincing them as a 19-year-old kid that you're worth listening to, what you're talking about, and you're going to make them successful, was something, I really had to develop quite quickly to get them to buy into me as a coach and buy into the system that I was trying to install.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about that? What it was like just diving right into it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first game I coached in, I was literally handed the playbook on the day. So our coaches were unavailable that day. I was still living up in about 150 miles away where I went to university. They weren't sharing the playbook in any sort of digital format at the time. It was all physical. So I was handed it and told, you're calling the plays, go for it. Like, this is it. It was my first experience. I just turned literally just when I was sort of like 18, 19 years old. Found something simple things that could get the ball moving, just try to get a feel for that, and just trying to very quickly build any sort of in-person relationship with those players, where I'd only really communicated with them online to that point, because I'd been, living away at university, come back, sort of thrust into that role quite quickly with no real opportunity to prepare, just very much, calling it on the fly as I saw it. And then going into the following season, they sort of made me fully the offensive coordinator at that point, and I was able to actually, build a system from the ground up. But I
Wow.
wasn't in a position where I had any offensive position coaches around me at the time, being down here on the South Coast, we you know, where we've got a coast, we have a semicircle we can recruit from. We can't pull from the bottom half because it's the sea, unfortunately. So therefore, the amount of coaches in the local area were limited. So not only was I trying to develop myself and my players, but also trying to develop, you know, brand new coaches who, again, typically slightly older than me, but, you know, maybe like less experience with football as a sport, but trying to put them in a position where they could succeed and, you know, really help develop them as coaches so that they could provide value to the players and ultimately make a difference to their performance out on the field.
Yeah. And you talked about when you were younger, not even knowing like what the Super Bowl was. So what's the progression of football in the UK been like over the past like 10 or so years?
It's so different from when I started. Like it's really exploded. Like I said, when I came back from the US, there was nowhere really for me to go. It just wasn't a thing until you turn sort of like 16, 17. Now we have flag football running from, I think it's about 7 years old, all the way till you turn about 16. You can start contact football for the first time. We have a thriving universities league with, you know, over 90 teams playing in our universities league. We have some of the best players in Europe over on scholarship playing right now. The European League of Football, which is the top level of football in Europe. The MVP of that league is a quarterback in the Universities League in the UK right now. So
Wow.
it's, you
That's
know,
cool.
elite level talent playing at that level, and then on top of that, you've got another, you know, 90 or so community teams that play throughout the summer. Our season's quite cyclical in that we have a summer season where our community teams play. So you have your, you know, adult football, 18s and overs. You have all of your sort of youth grade football. So everything from that under sevens flag all the way up to under 19s contact. That all runs sort of through the summer. They'll have pre-season sort of January time from that point, and then their season ends with our sort of showpiece final we call Brit Bowl, which runs in September. And then our university season runs on the flip side of that, runs from October through to March, where the final of the American football kicks off what's called Bucks Big Wednesday, which is the big final for all of the university sports here in the UK. It's held in one central location. Typically, the American football games is the first event happens on the Tuesday, the day before, as the big kickoff event for the rest of the sports that are going on.
Okay. And since it's progressed so much over the past decade, do you see maybe even the NFL going national, like international, where maybe there is an NFL team in the UK at one point? Do you see that potentially?
I think it definitely could be possible. The thing that's really cool over here now is we've started to progress in terms of actually sending some players over to play Division One college football and to even go play in the NFL. F.A. Abada, who was with the Bills and then the Panthers, then the Bills, I think, was working here in London, joined a local community team, went through the international player pathway that the NFL runs, and ended up, you know, playing and, you know, actually producing on the field in NFL games. There's been several players who've made it out there to international rosters. One of our alumni from the University of Portsmouth, a player we had quite recently, was involved in one of the last rounds of the international player program. We've got a lot of guys sort of coming through, and we've got the NFL Academy here now, which is really helping to fast track guys out going into college football to go and make a difference. And it's really supported by some fantastic coaches out in the US. You know, I know Campbell in particular have been really supportive of the NFL Academy. And the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh in particular have been fantastically supportive. Our Great Britain national team quarterback is currently out there playing, you know, Division III college football, which is an opportunity that, you know, for the kind of quarterbacks that we get over here in the UK is not something necessarily that they would have had the opportunity to experience by that point. So it's a fantastic development opportunity.
Yeah, that's really cool. And at my alma mater, Gettysburg College, where I played football, we had a few students who were actually from Germany. So from Europe, and it's pretty cool to just see like the expansion of the game, not like outside of the US. So, really exciting stuff to see over the next, 10 plus years.
Definitely. There's players right now about to, come out and play, Division 1 college football. The guys at Colorado, Tennessee, like big Power 5 programs, which are starting to roster British players who've come through these systems, and will very soon hopefully be making their debuts as well.
Definitely. So, what advice would you give yourself when you were just starting off like 10 years ago as a 18, 19-year-old coach?
The first thing I'd probably tell myself is it's okay to not know everything. And it's okay to admit to players that you don't know everything. When I was that age, I thought you had to be the final authority. You had to have the answer. And it's okay to sort of open up that little, not necessarily window of vulnerability, but just that element to players of, I don't necessarily know the answer right now, but let's find out together. And let's go on that sort of journey of understanding together, rather than I have to be the final say on everything. Which is where I thought you had to be when I was 18, 19 years old, because obviously I've been coached by, coaches with a lot more experience who did have the answers at that time. But where I was just at the very start of my coaching journey, didn't necessarily have the on hand, oversight from a more experienced coach. I wasn't then able to get that straight away. So it was a case of, building networks with coaches out in the US, and trying to develop myself, find those answers, and ultimately develop myself as a coach to better provide for our athletes.
Yeah, and that's it. If you were to go into coaching as an 18-year-old and know stuff like that, would be unreasonable to think. So, I think for the young coaches out there that are watching this, just understand, like Coach Gibbs was saying, you don't have to know everything, and it's all about, like, it's a progression. So whether you start out as a GA or a position coach, you have to realize that you're not going to be like an expert from the very start. It's just about taking it day by day and continuously learning. And I think you can attest to this too as well, Coach Gibbs, just that you really never stop learning, right? And the thing is, even the best coaches like Andy Reid or Belichick, guys that are in their like 60s or even 70s, those are guys that still to this day do not stop learning. So, it's a great lesson to learn that Coach Gibbs shared today.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I was sort of thrust into that play calling role very early on, but I stepped down from that to go find more experienced coaches to go be a position coach from. And I know it's, for young coaches, there's that urge to sort of jump into that sort of like play calling role where there's more responsibility and it's your system and you're sort of running the show. But I wouldn't overestimate the value of, or underestimate the value of, just spending that time with more experienced coaches who might look at things in a slightly different way, or might prepare their practices in a certain way, or even down to I worked with a coach recently who picked a specific side of the field to warm up on, because if he picked the side that a home team would typically take, the away team would walk through his warm-ups and disrupt their warm-ups. So even small things like that you can then pick up and take forward as a coach yourself, that you wouldn't necessarily have, it might seem obvious in the moment, but you wouldn't necessarily have thought of, if you were just there trying to learn 1,000,001 things about this fantastic game on your own, when there are those sort of fonts of knowledge, certainly in local areas that you can then pick up on and draw from.
Yeah, and that's really where confidence comes from, is just I guess learning from people that are better than you, and as you continuously do that, you're going to improve and then just become more confident in yourself. So, 100% agree with that sentiment as well.
Definitely.
So, awesome. Any last words of advice, Coach, that you want to share with the audience today?
Just when you when you're starting out really with coaching, it's really easy to be in a position where you think, like I say, you think you have to know everything, but it can't be almost a collaboration with the players. Like, in a lot of cases, players are smarter than you necessarily give them credit for, and they can come in with good solutions and good sort of workarounds that they've been, trialing with their friends, like to find solutions to problems that they've been seeing and come back and feedback. But to enable you to effectively do that, you need to make sure you're able to speak with a common language. And actually be able to communicate in a way where when they're saying something, you're understanding exactly what they mean. So setting early on those sort of ground rules around, this is what we mean, setting definitions, introducing it as a language, as a way of communicating, so that when those players do come to you with some feedback from what they see on a field, they're the ones out there at the end of the day playing the game. If they're coming off and they don't know how to verbalize what it is that they've seen out there, how are you then able to make the necessary adjustments to give them the best opportunities to succeed? So really putting those players in a position to succeed, and putting yourself in a position to succeed by making sure you're all sort of singing off that same song sheet and able to speak in terms that make sense to everyone, and everyone's able to communicate in that common language and on that same framework is something that is really easy to overestimate, but definitely valuable to invest the time into.